Welcome to the HR Happy Hour Work Break with Steve and George Laroque back for his triumphant return to the work break and his guest stint, guest co-hosting the work break this week. George, how are you?
Hi, Steve. Thank you. I'm getting very comfortable with this. I'm feeling cozy and at home here.
I know you're warm, keeping that chair warm. Yeah, I know. Trisha's got to worry that maybe like it's a Lou Gehrig, Wally Pipp kind of thing happening here, and that's a very old school reference. Probably no one under 45 might know that reference, but yeah, she might be getting Wally Pipped.
Fun fact. My daughter's 6-year-old softball coach. His name is Lou Gehrig.
Wow.
And the team is the Yankees.
That is pretty awesome.
That's
pretty awesome. Yeah. I wonder what that's like to have a name that's different because that person would have been born almost certainly after the world knew of Lou Gehrig as a very famous athlete and famous person. Yeah. But sometimes you kind of you can have a name that all of a sudden becomes a famous person's name and then you just have it. Like let's say you were, I don't know, 15 or 12 years old and your name was Michael Jackson. And then Michael Jackson became the biggest pop star in the world and you happen to have that same name. You fell into it. That's got to be a little weird.
Yeah, that has to be. But yeah, this coach, Lou Gehrig, like when you name your child Lou Gehrig, you know you're naming your child Lou Gehrig.
Yeah.
Especially I'm in the New York area. So yeah,
So George, I had a question for you.
Okay.
Because I know part of what you do anyway is you really keep your finger on the pulse of funding and fundraising in the HR tech space and companies going public, companies raising funds, growth, et cetera, et cetera. Here's my question, George, and I mean this abstractly, not for a specific company, but like sometimes I read these fundraising announcements, whether it's a tech company or an HR tech company, it doesn't really matter. Maybe it's a smallish company, 30, 40 employees, but they're having some success, they're getting a little bit of traction. And there's a lot of money out in the market right now for various reasons. And all of a sudden they raise, I don't know, like $110 million. You read this article, like company XYZ has been around for 3 years, 40 employees, they raise $110 million. So here's my question. What do you do as a company like that when all of a sudden you come in one day and $110 million has been wired into your bank account? Like what do they do with that money? Well, I don't really get it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. I think, after they take some out of the bank, put it on the floor, roll around in it, right? Maybe, yeah. Once that's finished, it generally has a purpose and it's got some oversight. So, it's depending on the culture of the company. That is a ton of money. There was a day when you would hear an announcement like that. It wasn't that long ago. When I would fall out of my chair over $100 million. But there was an announcement yesterday, Daily Pay raised $500 million, right? And
I think that's what inspired me to ask the question today. Yeah.
Yeah. And there are others who have raised 200, 250. We had another unicorn appear last week, which means they're valued at over $1 billion. They don't even have $100 million in revenue yet. Right. So it generally goes towards hiring. It goes go to market, product, all the things that you would expect. But yeah, I'm sure they also maybe have a little fun, a little team building.
I hope so. Because last week, George, I won $85 on a scratch off ticket, and I was like, all right, like I thought I was boom. What am I going to do with this? It was crazy. So I was thinking about, well, what's the comparison there? So yeah, well, it is crazy though, just in terms of, I wonder, I slightly worry a little bit though. I don't know if you ever do now, George, especially since some of these raises in our space, in the HR tech space, have been so massive. They can't all pay off. I can't see how they can, right? Some of them are going to miss, right?
Yeah, well, the model itself, right? The VC world, the rule of thumb is like 10% of them are successful, and it I guess depends on what your definition of success is. But yeah, they're not all going to make it. And when I look at some of these companies, and I'm not going to name any, I don't want to pick on any,
Sure.
But it's the valuations, right? When they raise so much money and then it's raised at a with a value where the value of the company is, unicorn level, and they're early in the market, and it's really difficult to see how they can deliver a return back to investors. And then the pressure starts and the founders don't own most of the company anymore. And that's where things start to spiral. And so, yeah, I'm with you. It's going to be interesting a year or two from now to see how these last 2 years of just mega rounds, how these companies fare.
Yeah, well, it's cool. Thanks for sort of sharing some insight on that, George. I know this is like a space you spend a lot of time in, but yeah, it's crazy. Well, congrats to DailyPay. That's a huge announcement. So I had one other thing I wanted to mention too, because one of the things I follow really closely is labor market stuff, minimum wage stuff. George, I read 2 more articles just this morning, right? There's been a lot of issues around raising the federal minimum wage, right? It's a political issue, it's political football, et cetera, et cetera. It's probably not going to happen for various reasons that don't matter really, like to us here, because the politics of it. But the market, George, is just creating this wage floor. It's just happening every day more and more. Today or yesterday, Bank of America announced they are raising their associate minimum wage all the way to $25 an hour. And they're going to get there in the next about 3 years or so.
Wow.
Right? $25 an hour. And Chipotle announced, Under Armour today, Under Armour, George, announced a $15 minimum wage. And that they join companies like Chipotle, Amazon, Costco, McDonald's, and plenty more that are announcing or are in process of raising their minimum wages, associate minimum wages, to around that $15 an hour mark, sometimes a little bit more. The market's just creating the minimum wage. And I guess the free market types would say that's the way it should be, et cetera. And then the downside of it is, right, there's still going to be pockets of places in the country or organizations that feel they just can't compete with really thin profit margins. They can't compete in that fashion with those wages at that level. I'm thinking like, smaller mom and pop kinds of places, which kind of, they had to compete with a company like Amazon, right? If you were like a small mom and pop retailer, right, in small town America, you're competing with Amazon for all the things you sell. Now, maybe if Amazon shows up nearby, there's, George, right up the road from me is one of the most massive distribution warehouses I've ever seen in my life, an Amazon one. It's like about 2 miles from where I live.
Oh, wow.
And like, when they show up, there's some data that shows minimum wages in the whole town and like the whole geographic area go up because of the upward wage pressure that a huge employer like that creates. But I mean, I think overall it's good, but I do think it's going to create some imbalance as well. But it's super interesting news anyway.
Yeah, it's funny because that's one of the stories that that I had seen. I was going to bring up because I appreciate you for your labor market insights, and but there's an optimistic side to it as well. So if those larger employers are raising the wages, then the research, a lot of research was cited through all of the stimulus packages that when you provide dollars into that worker demographic, into the sort of hourly world, they actually put it back into the economy. So if they're putting it back into the economy, then your smaller businesses will benefit from that, and maybe it eases some of the pressure on the wages, right? That's I'm being optimistic. Yeah. Related to this, one I brought for you is that in the New York Times this week, and maybe you've already, I apologize if you've already covered it, but they said they're bringing back unemployment pay may again require job search. So through the pandemic, they removed that requirement.
Sure.
And I was curious, where do you fall on this, on the whole discussion around unemployment benefits? Is that's what is driving the wages up, because we have to compete with folks earning more from benefits, unemployment benefits, and will this balance?
It's such a contentious issue, and I guess my answer is I don't know yet. There's not any real data that suggests that's causing widespread inability to fill jobs, but there's plenty of anecdotal evidence. And I think what we're seeing is it's just a market trying to find its equilibrium, right? Again, we're talking about these companies raising their minimum wages. And so raising that floor right? There's two things that are raising that floor. One, like we talked about, are these large employers raising their wage floors, but it's also in many places these extended unemployment benefits also raising the floor for support, right? Public sector support for people up to a certain amount. I had read that it was around 30,000-ish annualized income. If that's about what you were earning prior to the pandemic, in most parts of the country, you were quote unquote better off just continuing to collect benefits. But there's so many other things going on, George, still, right? That are going on, like just the awful working conditions in many of these places, particularly restaurants. Kitchens and restaurants are awful, and they have been for a really, really long time. Still not enough vaccinated people in certain parts of the country. People are still worried about that. And a lot of schools not open, right? So the school year's winding down, but now we're going to have summer again, and lots of childcares are not open and closed during the pandemic and did not reopen. I think there's definitely an imbalance there. George, it's a super interesting topic. We're doing a podcast. In fact, we're recording it on Monday with one of the economists from Indeed. So I'm going to do like 40 minutes on the labor market next week and try to post that next week. So it's going to be really awesome. Yeah. George, last thing for me, and we probably should go. Okay. I'm doing a webinar tomorrow with my friends from Paychex on employee mental health. They've got new research that they're going to share and we'll be talking about, and also resources and tips and advice and strategies for improving workplace mental health based on the research from my friends at Paychex. The registration info is pinned to my Twitter page. You go to @SteveBoese, it's a pinned tweet right there. You can register for free tomorrow at 2 p.m. So I hope to see lots of folks there. All right, George, good fun. I'll see you back here on Friday.
Great, thanks.
All right, buddy. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time. Catch the archives at hrhappyhour.net.